On May 9, 1992, Dorothy Zbornak stood in the Miami living room she'd called home for 7 years and tried to say goodbye. Bea Arthur delivered her final lines on The Golden Girls, and millions of viewers watched through tears as Dorothy struggled to leave the women who had become her family. The Emmy-winning comedy was ending after 7 seasons of cheesecake and friendship, and something bigger was ending with it. Because 1992 wasn't just the year The Golden Girls said goodbye. It was the year an entire era of television died, and a new one was born in its place. The broadcast television season that closed in the spring of 1992 saw an unprecedented wave of farewells. 4 landmark sitcoms that had defined the previous decade all aired their final episodes within weeks of each other. ABC's Growing Pains ended with the Seaver family leaving New York for Washington, D.C. to support Mother Maggie's new job. Who's the Boss concluded with housekeeper Tony Michelli, now a college professor, returning to Connecticut to be with his former employer, Angela Bauer. Over at NBC, The Cosby Show's final episode saw Theo Huxtable graduate from college before his parents, Cliff and Claire, danced off their living room set and into television history. And preparing for their final seasons that September were 2 comedies forever tied to the same era, Cheers and Designing Women. These weren't just shows ending, they were cultural institutions closing their doors. The Golden Girls had premiered in 1985 and immediately became a phenomenon, proving that 4 women over 50 could anchor a primetime comedy. The show tackled aging, sexuality, prostrem, and friendship with a frankness that hadn't been seen before. Bea Arthur, Betty White, Rue McClanahan, and Estelle Getty became household names. The Cosby Show had dominated NBC's Thursday nights since 1982, reshaping how television portrayed African-American families. Growing Pains and Who's the Boss had been staples of ABC's family-friendly lineup throughout the late 80s. Their simultaneous departures left massive holes in network schedules. But sitcoms weren't the only casualties. One-hour dramas were also saying goodbye. MacGyver, the action series that showcased Richard Dean Anderson's resourceful hero who could build bombs from paper clips and duct tape, wrapped up after 7 years. The show had been a Reagan-Bush-era staple, embodying a certain kind of American ingenuity and can-do spirit. Knots Landing, the last primetime soap still standing after the cancellations of Dynasty and Dallas, kicked off its 14th and final season in the fall. The era of glamorous, backstabbing, shoulder-padded evening soaps was officially over. The biggest farewell came from late-night television. On May 22, 1992, Johnny Carson signed off from The Tonight Show after 30 years behind the desk. Millions watched as Bette Midler serenaded Carson while he held back tears in that historic Burbank studio. Carson had been a constant presence in American homes since 1962. His departure felt like the end of something fundamental, a connection to an older, more unified television landscape where everyone watched the same thing at the same time. Something bigger than television was driving these changes. The 1992 presidential election marked a generational shift in American politics. Bill Clinton campaigned throughout the country blaring Fleetwood Mac's "Don't Stop," insisting that America keep thinking about tomorrow. The message was clear: out with the old, in with the new. Clinton represented youth, progressivism, and change after 12 years of Republican leadership. When he won in November, defeating George H.W. Bush, it confirmed what had been building all year. The 80s were officially over, and whatever remnants remained were being swept away. The cultural shift that began in politics rippled directly into entertainment. Generation X suddenly became the hot demographic. The kids who had grown up watching 70s television were entering their 20s in 1992. These fresh-faced, flannel-wearing youngsters were taking hold of the zeitgeist and the economy. Networks recognized they needed programming that spoke to this new audience, and they needed it immediately. MTV understood the assignment. The Real World premiered on May 21, 1992, placing 7 strangers in a New York City loft and filming what happened when they stopped being polite and started being real. The show invented reality television as we know it today. It captured Generation X at a specific cultural moment, addressing issues like AIDS, race, sexuality, and identity in ways scripted television hadn't attempted. The Real World proved that young people would watch other young people simply living their lives, and the format would spawn countless imitators. Fox took a different approach with Melrose Place, which premiered on July 8, 1992. The network broke convention by launching a drama in the middle of summer, a season typically reserved for reruns. Melrose Place focused on 20-somethings living in a trendy Los Angeles apartment complex, and it dared to be messy from the start. The show initially struggled, but when Heather Locklear arrived as conniving Amanda Woodward at the end of the first season, it found its identity. TV Guide eventually called it a Gen X dynasty, and the comparison was apt. Melrose Place took the glamour and backstabbing of 80s soaps and filtered it through a younger, edgier lens. The fall of 1992 brought more attempts to capture the new demographic. Mad About You premiered on NBC on September 23rd, starring Paul Reiser and Helen Hunt as Paul and Jamie Buchanan, young married Manhattanites with no kids enjoying metropolitan life. The show represented a more sophisticated approach to marriage, focusing on the small moments and neuroses of urban couples. It was accessible enough for a broad audience but spoke directly to the experiences of younger viewers navigating adult relationships. Fox's Martin premiered on August 27, 1992, starring comedian Martin Lawrence in a sitcom that blended physical comedy with urban humor. ABC's Hangin' with Mr. Cooper debuted on September 22 with Mark Curry as a former NBA player turned substitute teacher. Both shows attempted to carry the comedy torch for Black America that The Cosby Show had held throughout the 80s. The landscape was changing, and networks recognized the need for diverse voices, even if their execution often fell short of true representation. CBS took risks with its drama programming. Picket Fences premiered on September 18, 1992, created by David E. Kelley. The show blended small-town nuclear family dynamics with quirky criminal cases and courtroom proceedings in Rome, Wisconsin. It was a new kind of procedural that didn't fit neatly into existing categories. The show tackled controversial topics like euthanasia, abortion, and racism with a sophistication that felt distinctly 90s. Picket Fences proved that procedural dramas could be both entertaining and intellectually challenging. The groundwork for even bigger changes was being laid. The pilot script for NYPD Blue was written in 1992, even though the show wouldn't premiere until September 1993. Created by Stephen Bachko and David Milch, NYPD Blue would forever change network police dramas. The show featured gritty realism, profanity, and nudity that pushed the boundaries of what broadcast television could show. Everything that came before, Moonlighting, Miami Vice, Magnum P.I., suddenly felt like fluff in comparison. NYPD Blue represented the future, younger, edgier, more willing to take risks. Networks struggled to replace their 80s staples. CBS attempted to woo younger audiences with 2000 Malibu Road, a soap opera starring Drew Barrymore and Jennifer Beals. It tanked. NBC debuted The Round Table, an Aaron Spelling drama with a soundtrack by Toad the Wet Sprocket. It lasted 1 month. The transition wasn't smooth, and many attempts to capture Generation X fell flat. Networks were learning that this new audience demanded authenticity and wouldn't accept cheap imitations of what worked before. The shift wasn't just about age, it was about specificity. 80s television had been about broadcasting to everyone, creating shows with broad appeal that entire families could watch together. 90s television narrowed its focus, targeting specific demographics with tailored content. The mission changed from entertaining everybody to depicting urban young singles navigating modern life. This reflected both demographic research and the backgrounds of the creatives pitching shows to networks. Another factor driving change was technology. The World Wide Web was penetrating the mainstream in 1992, signaling the last hurrah for conservative 80s culture while a younger generation discovered new ways to entertain themselves. The internet was still primitive by today's standards, but its arrival marked the beginning of a technological revolution that would eventually transform how people consumed entertainment. Television's monopoly on attention was ending, even if nobody quite realized it yet. The changes in 1992 would bear fruit in the years that followed. Friends premiered in 1994, becoming the defining sitcom of Generation X with its focus on young urbanites navigating careers, relationships, and coffee shop culture. ER launched the same year, bringing cinematic production values and rapid-fire storytelling to medical dramas. The X-Files debuted in 1993, capturing a generation's paranoia and distrust of authority. These shows were all direct descendants of the cultural shift that happened in 1992, when networks recognized they needed to serve a new audience with different expectations. The year 1992 proved that change, while painful, was necessary. The shows that ended had been cultural touchstones, defining an era when families gathered around television sets to watch the same programs. Their departures created space for new voices, new formats, and new stories that spoke to a changing America. The mission of television evolved from trying to please everyone to serving specific audiences with authentic, targeted content. Television in 1992 was still dominated by networks and scheduled programming, but the seeds of fragmentation had been planted. The internet would eventually shatter the monoculture that Carson, Cosby, and the Golden Girls represented. But before that happened, 1992 marked the moment when television consciously chose to move forward, embracing youth, edge, and specificity over broad appeal and family-friendly content. What show from 1992 do you think had the biggest impact on television's future? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this look back at how TV transformed, subscribe for more documentaries about the entertainment that shaped our world.